when the International Criminal Court in March 2023 issued an arrest warrant against Russian President Vladimir Putin, it triggered a global question. If a sitting head of state indicted for alleged war crimes tries to travel, could he be detained? For many, the idea that any leader might be answerable to a global court looked like a historic advance for international justice. And indeed, media coverage since then, from August 2025 speculation about a potential summit between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump in Alaska, to later discussions about a possible meeting in Europe, has repeatedly foregrounded the risk of arrest. Headlines such as ICC arrest warrant for Putin limits where any summit could take place have made clear for ICC member states the warrant is no small matter. Similarly, his decision earlier in 2025 not to attend the BRICS summit in Brazil was explicitly tied to the warrant. The Kremlin said the legal risk was too high. Thus, any foreign trip by Vladimir Putin becomes headline. Could this be the moment international justice catches up with him? To understand why arrest remains unlikely in New Delhi, one must understand how the ICC works and how it doesn't. The International Criminal Court was established under the Rome Statute of 1998. As of 2025, 125 countries have ratified the statute and are considered states parties. Crucially, only states parties are legally obliged to cooperate with the International Criminal Court, including executing arrest warrants, surrendering indicted individuals, and exchanging evidence. If a country is not a party to the Rome Statute, the ICC has no enforcement power on that country. The treaty does not bind its domestic law or its obligations. That structural limitation is key. The ICC does not have its own police force. It depends entirely on the goodwill or legal obligation of sovereign states to enforce its rulings. Therefore, an ICC warrant creates a potential but not automatic trigger for arrest. Whether it becomes real depends on where the suspect travels. That brings us to the core of why a visit by Vladimir Putin to New Delhi is unlikely to result in an arrest. India is not a party to the Rome Statute of the ICC. As a non-member, India is under no legal obligation to recognize or act on the International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Indian authorities are therefore under no treaty-based duty to detain or surrender Vladimir Putin if he lands on Indian soil. Even though the ICC has demanded cooperation from state parties, the court's authority does not extend beyond those jurisdictions. Non-members remain outside its legal reach. Hence, the warrant remains legally unenforceable in India unless India voluntarily decides to act, which it hasn't indicated it will. Indeed, leading news analyses published ahead of the 2025 India-Russia summit emphasize exactly this point. India has no obligation under international law to arrest Vladimir Putin. The New Delhi visit is not without precedent. Since the International Criminal Court warrant was issued in 2023, in 2024, Putin travelled to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, a member of the International Criminal Court, and was not arrested. Despite legal obligation, Mongolian authorities allowed him a ceremonial reception and later refused to detain him. As a result, the ICC formally referred Mongolia to its oversight body, emphasizing that non-cooperation is a real sanctioned outcome. These patterns show that even among ICC members, the decision to enforce a warrant is deeply political, not automatic, often weighed against strategic, diplomatic, or economic considerations. The ICC can issue a warrant, but as enforcement history shows, execution depends on states acting. For a non-member like India, the legal hurdle is even higher. There is simply no obligation. Holding an international indictment does not guarantee universal mobility restrictions. The Putin-New Delhi situation underscores a broader, uncomfortable truth. international justice, as embodied by institutions like the ICC, still depends heavily on state cooperation and consent. The effectiveness of global accountability mechanisms is uneven, especially when major powers stay outside or actively reject the court's jurisdiction. Russia, the United States, China, India, among others, remain outside the ICC fold. Even when a country is a member, compliance with ICC warrants is not guaranteed. Political, economic, diplomatic interests frequently prevail over legal or moral commitments. In practice, this means that indicted individuals, even high-profile ones, may still travel or operate with relative impunity as long as they limit themselves to countries that either don't respect the warrant or are non-parties themselves. In short, the global justice system remains deeply fragmented and selective, especially when it comes to powerful states and leaders. This isn't and shouldn't be a cynical resignation to impunity. Rather, recognizing these structural limitations helps us understand why legal accountability remains a long, uncertain road, even with international institutions in place. For victims and activists, the ICC remains invaluable. Arrest warrants and indictments carry symbolic and political weight. They send a message: crimes don't go unnoticed. But symbolic weight alone cannot guarantee justice if enforcement depends on diplomatic willingness. The disconnect between treaty law and realpolitik remains wide. For India and other non-member states, the decision whether to cooperate or remain neutral will continue to be shaped by strategic, economic, and geopolitical considerations. Thus, Putin's New Delhi visit, while breezing past the ICC warrant, is a reminder that accountability in international justice is only as effective as its weakest link: state cooperation. When headlines wonder whether a traveling Putin might be arrested abroad, they often reflect hope. Hope for justice, for accountability, for international rule of law that can transcend power. But the hard and largely unspoken reality is that jurisdiction and enforcement power remain fragmented. In the case of India, a non-member of the Rome Statute, there is simply no legal basis to act on the ICC warrant. That makes New Delhi in 2025 a safe harbor for Vladimir Putin, not because justice has failed per se, but because the architecture of international law remains deeply state-centric. Whether that architecture will ever evolve, or whether states will one day act with enough conscience to close enforcement gaps, remains the pressing question for global justice.